Hello, Internet! Welcome to Full Frontal Developer. No doubt you've seen some flashy web page content in your day and wondered to yourself, how is this created? Today we'll show how with only a few lines of code, you yourself can create something just as fantastic. The project we'll be working on today is the Blurry Loader project. This takes a high-resolution image which starts off blurry and brings it gradually into full clarity. During this, we'll have a percentage counter in the center of the screen that begins at 0 and works its way all the way up to 100% as the image is being brought into clarity, and the counter itself will begin to become transparent until it fully disappears once the image is fully finished. Just to show a finished product, we'll go ahead and bring up the screen right here, and I'll need to reload it so that you can watch the transition. It's going to be blurry, coming into full focus with the counter in the middle that slowly disappears. I'm going to go ahead and run this one more time just so we can see what the finished product looks like. And so just fabulous, nice and flashy and surprisingly easy to create. And so let's get started. I'm going to start by moving my browser window over to the side of the screen so that we can work with the project and watch it come to fruition as we finish it. And we'll jump into our Visual Studio, which is an excellent application for doing front-end development. And we have here the three obligatory files, our index.html for the body, our script.js for the functionality, and our style.css for the styling. So beginning with our index.html, let's go ahead and carve out a body for this project. This is going to be HTML5, so we'll begin with the doc type declaration. We'll start an HTML tag. And within the HTML tag, we will go ahead and make a head tag. Inside the head tag, we will go ahead and declare our meta content. The first meta tag we're going to make is going to be our character set, which we will define as being UTF-8. And this ensures that all of our characters are properly encoded. And we can't forget to close that off. Next, we will make a meta tag which will define our viewport. So we'll do name equals viewport, and we will ensure that whatever device is being used to look at this, it is scaled correctly and mapped correctly to the screen. So we'll set the content and the width of the content equal to the device width, like so, and we'll define the initial scale as being 1.0. All right. Next, we will go ahead and define our link. This is going to be a style sheet. And we've named ours style.css. After that, we will create a title, and we'll call this one Blurry Loader. That should be everything we need in our head tag. Now we can go ahead and jump in and make a body tag. And the actual HTML content is going to be pretty simple. We're going to have a section that we'll call as class background, BG. And we'll leave that closed off right there. Next, we'll create a div tag. And we'll call this one loading-text, and we'll start this off with the text of 0%, and then we'll use the JavaScript to manipulate that to make it increment all the way to 100% and then disappear as it's doing so. Lastly, we'll include our script. In our scripting tag, the source is going to be our script.js, and that's actually everything that we need for the HTML. So the body is complete. We will save this, and we will go ahead and let's go ahead and open this up and see what it looks like here. So we have a very plain white screen with a very plain text of a very plain 0% counter in the very plain location of the upper left. So nothing crazy yet, but we have only just begun. Let us go ahead and jump into the style.css. This will as well be pretty short and pretty simple. So what we're going to do is let's start by importing our font. And I always like to go to Google Fonts, fonts.google.com, and here I've selected a fun little robotic techie sort of font called Audio Wide. And if I click on the import button over here, it gives me a tag. I don't need the style tags. I'm only going to select the import statement itself right here. And that import statement I will go ahead and bring over to my style.css. Let me just copy and paste that. That will give us access to that fun font. All right, so then moving right along, let's go ahead and apply a universal styling to our document. It'll be a box sizing of type border box. Next, we'll go ahead and begin to work on the body. Some styling for the body will include a font family. We need to include the font that we imported. And this is going to be the Audio Wide font. And make sure that we declare it as being sans serif. The display we will make as flex. And with flex, we always align items to the center and justify content to the center. We'll make a height of 100 viewports, 100 view height, and the overflow we will make hidden. We don't want any scroll bars. And then we will make the margin 0 because it's better to declare the margins as you go through the project. And let's go ahead and begin to style the background class that we defined. This background class will have a background image. We'll simply do background and then we'll include a URL. And inside the URL, we will provide our image source. This particular one, I've gone to unsplash.com, which is a great place to get some royalty-free, beautiful images and artwork. I've selected this guy right here. We can just open that in a new tab, and then we can select the link to that. So if we select this link, bring it over, and copy and paste that into the URL for our background, it gives us the link to the image. And let's see, furthermore to that, we need to make sure that we add some other attributes before the semicolon. I'm going to put in here that there's going to be a no repeat, and it's going to be center and center/cover. That way it is, goes from corner to corner. And that should be everything we need for the background image. After that, we'll further edit our background attributes, or our background class, by making the position absolute, and it's going to be positioned according to a top of 0 and a left of 0. All right, give it a width of 100 viewports, 100 view widths, and a height of 100 view heights, so it fills the entire screen. And then let's give it a z-index of -1 because we want the percentage counter to be on top of it. And then we're going to apply a filter, and the filter we're going to apply is going to be a blur. The blur function will accept a parameter. It's going to be a blur of 0 pixels initially, and actually if we save that and we bring it up over here, let's go ahead and open that up real quick. Close this down. So if I run this, the 0 pixel blur provides essentially no blur at all. Let's go in here and edit this real quickly. We'll make it a 70 pixel blur so you can see the difference there. And that there is the 70 pixel blur. All right, and so what we need to do is eventually use the JavaScript to have it start from 100 pixels and count itself down to 0 pixels, and that will be what brings it into clarity. All right. Continuing on, let's bring this over here and widen up our Visual Studio library. We're going to change that back to 0, at least initially. And I think that's every styling we need to do for the background. So now let's attack the loading text. And this is going to be loading text. And this is going to be a font size of 50 pixels. We'll make it nice and big. And then we'll do a color. Actually, I do like the color black. We can leave it black. So it's going to be 000 like that, nice and black. We'll save that. All right. So I believe that's all the styling we're going to need to do. Let's go ahead and jump into our script.js file and begin to come up with the functionality. So the hardest part of this is going to be coming up with the math that maps the blurry loading to the percentage counter. And we'll actually show you how that's going to be done. Let's start by declaring some constants. We have a constant called load text, and we'll set it equal to a document query selector. And since we've named it the class loading text, like so. Next, we'll declare a constant called background, and we'll set that equal to a document query selector. We've named this one background, or we've named it BG, I should say. Can't forget the period because it's a class. Next, we're going to do a variable. We're going to let a variable called load equal to 0, and we're going to let an integer equal set interval. Set interval is going to be a function, and it's going to take a blurring, and we're going to have it approach 30. Now let's go ahead and write the function blurry. Now a function called blurring, accepting no parameters, and in the function body we're going to increment load. So it'll start at 0 and it'll increment. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that if load is 100%, so if load is actually greater than 99, then we are going to clear the interval. And the interval is going to be what actually creates the repetitive looping in this function. So after that, we're going to take our constant load text, and we're going to change the inner, not inner HTML, rather the inner text, and we're going to set it equal to, and we're going to go ahead and bring in a literal from our style here. So we're going to need to use, there's a quotation mark, a single quote mark under the tilde in the upper left that we're going to need to use. The $sign tells it that we're using a variable, and we're going to use the curly brackets to tell it that we want the load variable with a percentage sign. And so what this is going to do is it's going to take this variable load, which starts at 0, and uses the set interval to loop through and increment it. And every time it does so, we're going to change the inner text of that particular class, which is load text, to whatever that number happens to be in. And then we're going to append a percentage at the end of it because we want it to look like a percentage counter. Next, we're going to do load text dot style dot style dot opacity, and we want the opacity to be equal to some sort of mapping of 0 to 1, because 1 would be fully opaque and 0 would be fully transparent, and that mapping has to line up somehow with the blurry loading, which is going to go from 30 to 0. So 30 is going to be as blurry as the text is going to, or rather the background image is going to be, and as 30 approaches 0, the image is going to become fully clear. In doing so, as 30 approaches 0 and the counter approaches 0 to 100, we need the opacity of the counter to go from 1 to 0. So let's figure out exactly how we're going to do this. We're going to need to have some sort of function right there. And then before we write that, let's do the background.style.filter. And we know this filter is going to need to be equal to the blurring filter. So we'll use that single quote under the tilde again. This is going to be blur. And we're going to need to include a literal variable here. So the blur is going to be equal to the, let's do some sort of function we're going to call scale. And the scale is going to accept some parameters. The parameters should be the value of load as it approaches 0, or as it starts at 0 and approaches 100, and then the value of the blur that starts at 30. And as it starts at 30 and approaches 0, we're going to need to pass through whatever that value is in pixels, and that will be what affects the blur. And so now up here with the opacity, we'll also use that function we're going to write called scale. So we're going to have, it's going to be set equal to that function of scale, which is going to accept whatever the value of load is that starts at 0 and approaches 100, and the opacity of it was going to start at 1. And as it approaches 100, the opacity is going to start at 1 and approach 0. And so then in writing this function scale, we're going to need to make sure that we pass through those, or that we write it to accept those 4 arguments. And so scale is going to be a constant, which is going to be a functional, which is going to accept some number. Let's do a minimum in and a maximum in, and a minimum out, and a maximum out, like so. So those would be the 4 parameters that we need. And this function is such that it will return, and now here we need to do a little bit of math to make sure we have this right. We're going to return the number minus the in min multiplied by the out max subtracting the out min, and that result is going to be divided by the in max subtracting the in min, and then we're going to add on the out min. And so it's just a little bit of algebra. It looks a little confusing, but if you were to run some test numbers through there, I think you'd see that that is actually the correct math there to make sure that we map on a value that goes from 30 to 0 to a value that goes from 0 to 100 to a value that goes from 1 to 0. And so let's see here. I think that's all of the JavaScript we're going to need here. This looks like it might be complete, so let's go ahead and save this. And as you can see just there, it looked like it worked. Let's go ahead and reload it. Beautiful. The last thing I want to do is I do want to change that text to white and make it a little bit bigger. So let's jump back in here to Visual Studio, to the style. We'll make that text white. And let's make it, I don't know, 75 pixels. Let's save that and see what that looks like. Didn't look like it did anything at all. Loading text is white, font size is 75. Well, in any case, I'm not going to spend too much time looking for the error with such a small detail there. It looks like it's working the way that we've at least expected it to work. And just to show you one more time here, this beautiful image being loaded from a blurry state with a nice little percentage counter disappearing. And so you can see that's actually fairly easy to whip up. It only took a few lines of code. Hopefully that was fun and entertaining, and I look forward to seeing everyone back in the next video. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.